So I'm just going to go over a little bit of basic styling with you before we go into the Illusion manual. Lash mapping and styling is a huge part of eyelash extensions. Eyelash extensions are really tough. They're hard to learn to apply, the theory is hard to understand, and there really is a lot involved. Stick with it though, because it is so worth it when it clicks and it just makes sense. Lash mapping and styling. So styling is when we style the lashes based on the face or the shape of the eye to create symmetry. Lash mapping is when we transfer that styling that we've created by looking at someone's face onto the pads. So when the eyes are closed, we tape down the bottom eyelashes so we can differentiate between the eyelashes when the eyes are closed. And we would use a little pen and actually write on the maps, right on the lash pads, the map that we're going to use. It makes it much easier when you lash map because it just makes you have one less thing to think about when you're lashing because you have that guide there. When we are doing a face-to-face session in terms of the theory, we kind of discuss these lashes together and I'll ask you kind of what you think and I'll explain what I think a little bit about them. But just to go over briefly, I mean, top middle here, beautiful, long, thick lashes. They would actually be a dream to lash. Bottom middle, a little bit finer, various lengths, a little bit tougher to lash. When you have beautiful, long, natural lashes, they are much easier to lash. Bottom right, for example, you can see they're quite fine. There's a few gaps in the lash line. It's really important to know when you are doing a consultation with clients and you're looking at their eyelashes, if that is damage or if it is just naturally their eyelashes. If it's damaged, generally I'm going to recommend a client goes away and maybe purchases a serum, gets their eyelash health back to normal, and then they come in. Whereas if it's just standard, it might mean that we need to kind of work a little bit just to bridge those gaps. Eye shapes. Various eye shapes for us to work with when we are looking at eyelash extensions. And generally we do want to create symmetry. So we want to do the opposite of what the eyes are doing. So for example, a client has open eyes, we want to elongate. A client has closed eyes, we want to open. A client has wide set eyes, we want to draw attention to the inner, and so on. So we've got some little diagrams here, upturned and downturned eyes. We have closed set and wide set, monolid and protruding. And like I say, we want to do the opposite, but I am going to go into that in much more detail when we go into the styling manual. But let's have a look at wide set eyes, for example. So a client has wide set eyes, which means they have more space in between their nose, so their eyes sit slightly further apart. What you can do with eyelash extensions is bring that length in closer. So when you look at the client, you are drawn to the inner part of their eyes instead of the outer part of their eyes, which gives the illusion that their eyes aren't wide set. If you're not taking that into account, for example, and a client does have wide set eyes and you are giving them a cat eye on the outer, you are going to elongate that wide set and it isn't going to be a brilliant representation of your work. 3 common eye shapes. Downturn. So if a client has a downturn, we want to lift. And what do we do if we want to lift? We use a stronger curl. We have we'll kind of upturn ever so slightly, but an almond. With almond eyes, if they're not too upturned or too downturned, generally they can handle any curl. And then we've got an upturn. So if a client has an upturn, we definitely do not want to use a decurl because we do not want to give any more lift. So we're going to use a more relaxed curl like a C, which is going to balance that upturn. Layering. If you have a look at the picture of that eye, we actually have layers and layers of eyelashes, so natural eyelashes, which is something I wasn't aware of when I first started training in eyelashes. So we kind of start like 1 to 2 layers and we go into 3 layers, 4 layers, 5, 6, 7, even 8 layers in that midsection, and then back down to kind of 4, 3, 2 layers. So when we're doing eyelash extensions, not only are we thinking about length, weight, diameter, dimension, we're thinking about layers. Because let's say, for example, I have a lower layer eyelash and a higher layer eyelash in my length section above my iris. If I am using a 12 millimeter, for example, and I put a 12 on the lower layer And then again, a 12 on the higher layer, that higher layer is going to stick out above my lower layer. So that's also something we need to think about. Again, I will discuss that when we go into the Advanced Styling Illusion Manual. Next, we're going to move on to adhesive.